yes, it was an evil act, but I don't believe that that person at their core is evil. I just don't, because I don't think that that's how we are. They made decisions that are way and had to express that choice in a way, but that didn't make them good or evil. And nor is it my place to judge it as good or evil. That's another part that I've had to learn in this process, is that it's not my job to be the judge or the jury.
Welcome to Unreasonable Autonomy. My name is Sarah Grace. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs and innovators who refuse to settle. Here we dive deep into raw, real conversations with boundary pushers who have pursued seemingly impossible ideas and yet have achieved unreasonable results, whether that's in their faith, relationships, health, politics, yes, even business. All of those conversations are happening right here, right now. So let's buckle up, because this isn't about playing it safe. Unreasonable ideas, unstoppable results. Let's go. We're thrilled to welcome to the podcast Lindsay Mustain. Lindsay Mustain is a former top Amazon recruiter turned international career strategist, best-selling author, and the creator of the Remote Career Revolution program. With over 20 years of experience in talent acquisition and career design, Lindsay has helped over 20,000, think about it for a minute, 20,000 professionals across 121 countries land six-figure roles where they do work that they truly love. Lindsay's intentional career design framework, along with her innovative approach to landing job offers, has added millions to her clients' paychecks without the need to return to school or apply through traditional job boards. Her strategies empower senior professionals to access hidden opportunities, negotiate top-tier offers, and accelerate their career growth. Lindsay is the proud mom of two, and her primary job is to create memorable moments with her children and husband. Her household is quite fuzzy-filled with 6 cats, 4 of which are foster, and 2 dogs. She is committed to leaving a legacy of empowerment, helping others achieve not just career success, but a life of purpose and fulfillment. Welcome, Lindsay Mustain, to the podcast. All right, everybody. Welcome to Unreasonable Autonomy. It is Sarah, your host, and I've got to get out of the way because I have Lindsay Mustain in the room. Hi, Lindsay. We're glad you're here. You guys, we were talking all about lip color before we got started. And I promise you that is not going to be the main topic of today. We have got some serious stuff to dive into. But first, let me introduce you to Lindsay. You already know a little bit about her because you heard her intro and like all her professional accolades and all the cool things about her. Like, she's a mom, she is an incredible business owner, and she's also like a really good friend. Like, rumor is you're a really good friend. Okay?
Oh, that's like the best compliment I think I could get.
Like, you might want to add it to your bio. Like, I'm a really good friend. Okay. That's a friend. When I talk to your friends, because Lindsay and I, we're friends by association, right? Like, we've been connected through other friends, and I've seen your name thrown around and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, girl, I'm gonna like get in this room with her and like find out more about her. And so before we get started, I know you because we are friends by association. And so I reached out to you via Facebook Messenger, and I was like, hey, I want to dive into your world and bring you on the podcast. And I got to tell you guys, like, within 2 or 3 paragraphs, we had dove into real things that have happened in your family, real things that have happened in your growing up, real things that have just shaped you as a person. And I was really blown away by the fact that you are just unapologetic that life is complicated. Life is complicated. Would you agree with that?
It is so complicated.
So complicated. And I just was impressed by that. And it made me want to get you on the podcast faster. And so I was like, I've got to get her on just like sooner than later, because this is what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about not the bright and shiny. We are here to talk about the fact that we are making decisions. We are going to be unreasonable with our lives by what we want out of family, what we want out of business, what we want out of religion or no religion or finances or whatever it may be. Like, we're here to dive into the things that you have faced that other people would say is unreasonable. So before we dive in to that specific thing, give us kind of the origin story. Like, how'd you get started in business? What do you do? This will bring everybody on the same playing field before we dive deep. So take it away, Lindsay.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I do love to tell people a little bit about where I got started. I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you today, I know you've already heard my intro, but what I do is I help senior professionals in corporate America land six-figure remote jobs and to do it without applying. So, how did I get there? Well, I was once a little girl who watched her dad go through unemployment for many, many years, and he actually never found a job. He got really sick on the way. Ended up at the ER. They took him for emergency brain surgery. He walked out a different man in an inoperable brain tumor, and he died just a couple months later. And I was 12 years old. I didn't know what a pink slip was then. I definitely did after. And I just watched how my whole family fell apart. We lost everything. I became a homeless teenager. So when I talk about like employment and work, to me, it's not just your day job, it's actually your livelihood, and it impacts every person in your family. That was my experience growing up with the corporate world. And eventually along the way, I actually became a recruiter. So I was the person on the other side of the phone, the person who was interviewing and saying no to 99.9% of the people who came and showed up at my doorstep. But for that 0.1%, that's what I lived for. I lived for giving people job offers. And I got really well known in that world and became Amazon's most visible employee talking about job search because I took it very personally. It was not just a little thing to me. It was a really big deal. And I really shared a lot about that. And that's actually what prompted me to start my business, was being able to help people, because guess what? Amazon did not like that I told you how to get jobs at places like Amazon. And so that's what I decided to do, was actually start my own business. And now that's what I do, is I reverse engineer the same process that I would go out, because I would go hire for some of the craziest things on the planet. Like, just think, there are 3 people in the world that can do this job. Lindsay, go find them and convince them that they should work at Amazon. I took that same process of how these people got jobs without applying for these really senior and crazy roles, and realized that every person who is a little experienced in the corporate world could use these same strategies to get jobs without applying endlessly, which is a very hard cycle. And that's what I do. I've been doing it since 2017. It allowed me to spend a lot more time at home and also change a lot more lives than that 0.1% of people. So that's what I do now.
Like, are you friends with Amazon? Like, when you hear the word
I've
Amazon,
gone back and talked to Amazon, and there are people who highly recommend me. There's also a lot of enemies I made along that way, because how dare I tell secrets about what it's like? But really, it doesn't hurt them to have better prepared candidates at their door. So we were just not on the same team. They really love to put people through the ringer, and it's a privilege to work at Amazon. But truly, it is a job. It is a job that will take everything from you if you let it. But there's some ways you can be better prepared for it. And it was an amazing experience for me to be there. I'm grateful for my time. I'm also very grateful that I don't work there anymore.
Oh my goodness. But you still, like, you're a Prime member and you order from Amazon.
My gosh. Yes. I wish I could quit Amazon in some ways, but I have not quit Amazon. I shop there a lot. But yeah, it was a really good development experience, because it let me see what I really liked and what I really didn't. And the thing that really changes whether or not you love your job is really your manager. That's the person. So
Amen.
Inside of your own business unit, you might have the best experience there, and then you'll have other experiences that are not so great. So I had both ends of the spectrum, and I'm really thankful that I did, because that painfulness of being in that job, that while they gave me a job that had never existed, doing work that had never happened, they treated me terribly. And so I decided that I would take that experience, and it pushed me out the door to go do something else. Sometimes our pain is our greatest catalyst to make a move, right? I don't know if you've heard the saying where it's like, why was it so painful? And the universe says, because you would have never moved otherwise. And that was that moment for me.
Oh my goodness. Well, and I love how complex your journey was, as far as what you witnessed as a child. And instead of having pain turn into paralysis, right? You allowed pain to be the driver, right? And who knows, we're going to talk about God later, but who knows what force was at play that was preparing you for the intense pains you would experience later in your life.
That is such a good point. I had somebody tell me, she ended up working for me as a virtual assistant early in my journey here, and she was my best friend in high school. And she said, she knew my story very well, right? At this point, what if everything that you had been through prepared you to be the person that could help all these other people? And that was one of the most powerful reframes I ever got in my whole life, because I stopped seeing those circumstances, me being almost a victim to them, and like having survived it, which is fine. A survivor's better than a victim, but that it actually prepared me to be the person that could help all these other people. And that to me was where I took back a story of, instead of things happening to me, that it happened for me. And so that
Right.
I could be the person that I needed to become. So kind of like forged by fire, right? Like things become more resilient as they're exposed to flame. In some cases, this
Yeah.
is that case for me.
Well, I want to bring something to the table that you just mentioned as far as like, if this is working in my favor, I can continue to shoot for bigger, more, like impactful things, like helping people get jobs. You understand the ripple effect that that has on children and a spouse and where you live and where you go to high school and where like it just has such a ripple effect, the work that you do, which I think is incredibly noble. And I want to bring in, maybe it's even a controversial point of view that is often found, like, I don't like, the bigger people get, the harder they fall, right? The bigger the fall.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so if you ever had experiences in your life or working with people where you're kind of like, look, I don't want to climb the mountain and I don't want to do the big thing because I don't want to be responsible for the fall, or I don't want to invite the ability that I have capacity to have more pain than other people because I've climbed the mountain. Like, where have you come to, like, in your brain as far as that? Like, why do you continue to reach for things that are so impactful for people?
I think that actually for me, the call to contribution, I think, is what Alex Sharfin calls it. And so that call to contribution is something I think that most entrepreneurs have. That's why we're here, is that we know that the biggest way that we can make a change in the world is actually by doing our own thing, not working in the spoke of a wheel of somebody else's engine. And
Sure.
so for me, though, I have a really real thing. This is what my therapist would tell you, that I am very trauma based, that life is very short. Life is very fleeting. And watching a lot of people in my world, pass away, realize like you are not promised tomorrow. So one of the things that I have, it's foreshadowing is what it's called, is that I realize that I think I have an expiration date here in the next couple of years. That's what I believe, because that's when my dad passed away. And so that sends me into that I better hurry up and do something, because I don't have a lot of time to waste. And I'm thankful for that, because it means I don't dilly-dally with a lot of things. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about things. I do think about things a long time, but most of the time I end up executing quickly, because I realize that very acutely that I may not have the chance if I don't do it now.
Okay, so I'm hearing that one of the ways in which you sort of live in the now and face your expiration date of a couple of years, using your words, is that you do think about things, but you execute quickly.
I do. I also have really narrow tunnel vision. Like there are a lot of things I'm good at. Oh, that sounds almost conceited, but I think it's true of a lot of, high performing people. We have lots and lots of skills. There are a lot of things. And so I love a lot of things. Like I'm the best at petting cats. If I could figure out how to make that a job, I would, but I don't focus on that. It is part of my story because I love cats. I love all animals, to be honest. I don't focus on that. I look at what is really narrow within my scope of the zone of genius. And so if I think it's that, and that it will help somebody's life be better, then that's when I go and do something. I really feel like, okay, I'm called to do this. And I do take those little nudges from, a higher power, that these are things you need to do, because it would be expressing yourself at the highest level, right? You're a creator of your own reality. So I need to do that. And I want my son doing that presentation for me. All I wanted was my kids to be proud of me. I wanted my kids to be proud of me. And so that to me is my legacy, because there are the story. At some point you become, I can't remember what movie this is, but you're a ghost of your children's past. I want that remembering or memory to be powerful. And I want them to think, like, what are they capable of? Because I'm doing something I am a total black sheep. I was already a black sheep in my family, but like I am wildly out of the safe zone for my family. What I do is they just think I'm crazy town. And I am, because you have to be a little bit crazy to do this. But it's why I can go ahead and do it. Now, do I have face fear? Absolutely. Like that's a struggle bus every day. But I always realize, like, that's my ego trying to keep me safe. And I'm not here to live for that. I don't want to be ordinary. I want to be extraordinary. I'm going to be a little extra. The only difference between ordinary and extraordinary is being extra. So yes, I am. And that's okay with me.
Yeah. And would you say that your family has supported you through that crazy? Or is it like something you don't mention at Thanksgiving dinner?
Oh, well, one of the things I learned is I was in a really bad cycle with a lot of not my nuclear family, my kids and my husband. We have I am so thankful for the relationships I have with my children and my spouse. But outside of that, I was joking. I was like, I don't really have a family tree. I have a family bush because basically it's me, my husband, and our kids. So it's a very, very small family. And that
Starts with you.
It kind of starts because I decided I didn't want to perpetuate cycles that had happened in my life. And so I was no longer interested in being a good girl. And I didn't care that they labeled people like me as hateful children. That what I was doing was actually breaking the cycle of trauma and abuse that had happened for generations, and that I was no longer going to play by those games anymore. And that has been over 2 years now that I have done that. And yeah, I'm not popular, but they didn't like me anyhow. So now I get to do what I want, how I want.
We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to back up when you said, I have a family bush. Okay. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, you're going to want to jump over to YouTube so you can actually see what she said, because you said, I decided I was not going to be a good girl. Okay. Where was this idea that you need the definition of what a good girl based in? How were you raised?
Gosh. Yeah. So I was raised in a very religious family, not my parents per se, but my grandparents. My grandfather was an elder in the church, and I taught vacation Bible school and at church, and very much, children to be seen and not heard, and you're to do as you're told. And if you don't, you're going to get physically injured if you don't. And so I learned very clearly.
Was this taught in the church or in your family culture?
Family culture, right? And so, God's always watching. I was very traumatized by my church experience. So and let me just say that there are people in the church that were really good, but what I really found was there was a disparity between like what I do and what I do and say on Sunday versus what I do every other day of the week. Very different. And so that, to me, reality of coming from that, like, it didn't really sit well with me. Things that I don't believe in anymore. I don't believe that I believe in a very different kind of God than the rest of my family believes in. And that's okay with me. But yeah, being a good girl was very much like the perfect child, like the perfect grandchild, and doing everything right. And still it not being enough to avoid getting injured, either emotionally or physically. Still, that was, even if I was perfect, that there was something that I was not good enough. I could never be good enough or well-behaved enough to avoid injury on this whole process. And when you think, I don't know if this is you, but I look at my children and I think I would never let anybody touch them like how my family touched me. And so I'm like, what you are is a big bully. Sorry, I don't know if you can swear on this, but you're just a big bully if you're beating up your kids. Like, that's what's happening. And so like I thought I'll do anything to not have that experience for my kids, and they have a totally different life. But so learning how to not be a good girl and to break the rules is actually what kind of what I specialize in now. I like to say, even in my corporate world, I stopped asking for permission and I started asking for forgiveness. Yeah. Because it allowed me to get a lot further. Because most of the time when I was betting on myself, I was right. I was rarely wrong. And I was willing to take the penalty for being wrong rather than try to get the permission, because nobody is willing to play outside of the box, especially in the corporate world. And so those things really aided me, but it was a really hard lesson to learn, because when you're trained to do as you're told and never deviate and never question anybody who is more senior or your family member, that really creates like the death of innovation in essence, right? Like, you got to play by the rules, got to play by the book. What if the book doesn't work? And that's kind of, ultimately what I found out about job searching was that playing by the book never worked. Because not only did I watch my dad get laid off, I got laid off early in my career. And I tried everything that they tell you to do that I should know as a recruiter. And it wasn't working. It wasn't working. And so that's what ended up happening was I was like, okay, this book doesn't work, so we're going to chuck it. And that's what I did. And when I realized like how you actually have to do these things and how people really get found, that's one of the ways I break the rules. And so
is by breaking rules. Well, and I think it's so easy to always look, 20 years ahead and look at the amazing Lindsay Mustain's life and be like, wow, she's just so innovative and she's just so creative and she's so determined and she's such a decision maker, and you don't recognize the price. You don't recognize the price of becoming that type of individual. And that's really what needs to be talked about. Like, don't talk to me about an email sequence, and don't talk to me about a CV structure, right? Like, talk to me about how you can fire me. It's fine. But like, talk to me about how we become those type of people to be able to stand out and really change the world as entrepreneurs. And so when you think back on being raised and your grandparents and the 2 years you've just spent transforming and being a rule breaker, do you have a moment that you point to as a kid or as a teenager or whatever age it was where you were like, something is off about this?
Oh
like
my gosh.
This was Sunday. Now I'm here on Wednesday. Like, what was it a moment?
Oh, wow. So I'm going to just give a little disclaimer. My grandparents were very good to me. My grandparents were really good. So like that, I found that actually I don't know that was the case for their children, but they were very, very good to me. Gave me a home away from home. I will say that about them, even though it was very so I'd go get picked up at my mom's, go to church, get dropped off. It was really at my mom's house that this was a crisis. And so there was, when you were raised in something where you realize like this is the norm. So you have this is homeostasis, right? This is just the average status quo. You have no reference. But what I did get was a boyfriend.
A boyfriend.
I got a boyfriend.
Yes.
I got a boyfriend. And this boyfriend saved my life. I didn't know that he would, but he did save my life. And he said, that's not normal, right? He said that to me one day. That's not normal, right? And so while I was wildly unhappy and even suicidal, which nobody cared about as a teenager, he did. And so I eventually ran away from home and I was on my own basically at 16. I'd been on my own. Let's just be really clear. I'd been on my own since my dad died, and my mom decided to she wasn't interested in being a parent anymore. So she kind of let me just raise my brother at that time. But then I finally left. And his family took me in. And
I had no idea.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. I don't really talk about this part. So they were very good to me. That family was, in fact, to the point where there's only one grandparent that's really close to my kids. And that's that grandma. She's not actually related to us by blood at all. She is related by choice. But my daughter,
part of the bush.
My daughter has, she's part of the bush. She totally is. My daughter has a choir, practice or performance coming up. And the only one that got that invite was that grandma, because she is that person for them. Loves unconditionally, gave me the space. It's Lauren. I was going to say, everybody needs a Lauren in their world that will literally save their life. And so I'm so grateful that somebody pointed out, because I didn't know. that it was wrong. And so luckily I got the message quickly and realized it isn't normal. And that allowed me to so when I say that was when I became a bad kid. That was the time that I finally, and I guess by their definition I am, but I saved my own self at that time. And so I'm glad I did.
So how did that relationship end or change with your boyfriend when you're now living with his family?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you graduate. I'm making assumptions here.
Yeah. I had to change schools. And I always say that Seattle is my city of freedom, because I came from the Midwest. So tiny little town in the Bible Belt. I actually ended up getting married to him. And so he is my first ex-husband. And so while I don't have any relationship with him, his sister is like my sister, and his mother is like my mother. And so I have been able to keep, somehow they do a really good job of being present for me and also being present for him. And really, I got married at 20. So we just weren't ready to be married. Yeah. And there was a lot of other things going on. And I had my own issues that I brought to that, because coming from a lifetime of trauma definitely did. And so while it didn't work out, I'm still incredibly grateful to him and his family. And his dad in particular was also very good to me too. And so he's since passed away, but that family saved my life. They saved my life. So I always say, I didn't get a lot of handouts. I got a lot of hand ups. They were the first ones.
They were the first. And so that's kind of a sacred relationship there for you with how that family served you.
I mean, that very broken 16-year-old and gave her a place that she was loved and safe and nurtured and had my back no matter what. Those were things I had never, ever experienced before.
And that hurts my heart a little bit.
It kind of sucks, right? So there's things where I see, like, I have a big heart for homeless people because I know what it's like to stay in a shelter. I know, like, I was never ever unhoused on the streets, but like I carry, we call them helping bags, or people might call them blessing bags, but I have them so that I can hand out to anybody I see who's in need or hungry. And, I said I love cats too. So I also have pet food in there too, because a lot of times they have dogs because they can't take dogs with them to shelters. And so these are things that, like, I do because that has a really special place in my heart, because I was just like that.
The way that you've pieced your life together, at least up until this point, is so deeply rooted, right? Like what your work is and the why behind that, and what your philanthropy is and the why behind that. Like, you're incredibly intentional about making things right.
Oh my gosh, doing my little part, right? Because I can't fix all the world's issues. I used to get really, really overwhelmed and thinking, like, what can you do? And really, you can only choose a couple of things that you can care and pour yourself deeply into. And so these are some of the things. Like, I care about women's health rights, and I care about animals, and I care about the unhoused community. So these are things that I care about. And then, of course, I care about people who are unemployed, because that affects everything. So that's probably my main one, but that's my business itself too.
Well, and you and I were talking before we started this conversation. And I also know that one of those things that you pour deeply into is the fact that you are a mom. You are a mom. And in fact, you brought up a story about your boy who's 12, and wondering if you'd be willing to kind of recap that story for our listeners, because I actually have a question for you after it that ties into who you were at 16 and who he is at 12 and your role as a mom. So,
gosh,
okay. And I've got questions, girl. Let's go.
And I thought I would struggle to tell you stories, and here I am telling you so many different stories. But
let's go.
I have a little boy who is 12, and I have a little girl who is 10, which are the same ages that my brother and I were when my dad passed away. So there is a lot of, like, reliving of experience going through them. But my commitment was that I really wanted to be a good mom. Like, in fact, I had this epiphany. I joined somebody very notable's inner circle.
We talk about him.
Yeah. Well, I joined it, and I had a real big thing that I did not care about the giant pissing contest that was inside of that room and who could make the most money with the most customers. And that the only thing I cared about was being a good mom. And I left. And I felt like I left my tribe to do that, to be this. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years after I had that epiphany. Was like, okay, I really want to be a good mom. And being a good mom is what we call it, infinite goal. I'll never reach the destination of being a good mom. I will just keep working towards it. My little boy, he was going through this phase at the end of last year. He just kept asking me all these questions, like, when did you publish your book? And was it a bestseller? And what kind of program was that named after? Or where did you come up with that name? Or where did you go to school? What was your degree that you studied in? And I was like, okay, it's weird. Like, I'm getting a job interview from my kid, but it was like over the course of a couple of weeks, and I thought that was really strange. And then I asking him something, and he goes, well, I was asked to make a list of, like, 3 people who changed the world. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Who did you pick? And he's like, well, I can't really remember the other 2, but the one, which is kind of funny, the one that I remember is I chose you. And that to me just stopped me. And I just remember, because I was driving, probably more than being a mom, I'm a chauffeur a lot. So I remember just looking into the rearview mirror and looking back at him, and I just started, like, tearing up. And I was like, are you kidding me? Are you serious, buddy? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God. And I just, like, I teared up at that moment. And I thought, well, there is no higher, like, I made it. I made it. Like, yeah, there is no award that you could give me, no publication that I could be featured in that would matter more than this moment, than him saying that. And I was like, I really thought that was sweet. He was working on something, and I was talking to him about it, and he goes, I said, who did you end up choosing? Because I figured he would choose somebody else. Like, I mean, I live with me, so I feel like I'm pretty average. But he's like, I chose you. And he was like surprised that I didn't know that he would choose me. But to me, like, that was it. And so he did the presentation. This has just happened. And he came home, and he read it to me because I was driving him home. And I just remember, like, being just awestruck that this is it. This is the moment when like my personal life and my professional life came together, because it's not like I help people with like their career narratives, their stories all the time.
Yes.
This is the first time for me where it came full circle, and it was the story that my son told about who I was.
Yes.
And that the part was like, I cried. I just cried. And I remember like, this is it. This is the moment. Like you reach the pinnacle. This is it. This is that moment for me. And so, because it's not just like, it's a almost 13-year-old boy who's telling this story about his mom in front of his peers. That to me was like, I made it. I made it. Nothing else will matter after this moment, because my son thinks I'm a big deal. That's the part that is like, my son thinks I'm a big deal, that I changed the world. And that's what, I mean, like really that part of me satisfies that little urge where I'm like, the only reason I do this is if I could just stop this story from ever happening to another family. And my son sees that in me. And it just to me was like, this is it. I've made it. I've made it.
Were you afraid you were going to be a bad mom?
Terrified. I remember like, most people like don't like, they find out they're pregnant. Yay, go to the doctor. No, I went to the doctor before I got pregnant to like be prepared. And then I bought every book. I have an entire shelf of every pregnancy book that I read, every parenting book, because I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't mess my kids up. Now, I always say we're going to put the fun in dysfunctional, like we're going to mess our kids up in some way, but it'll be the part that makes them funny, not the part that makes them scarred as a human being. However, people who come from trauma on the other side of trauma, they tend to be some of the most resilient people on the planet. So I don't want to, I think Brene Brown says, you don't prepare the path for your child, you prepare your child for the path. And that's what I'm going through. But I'm not hoping that I don't hand them the same generational trauma that I've had. But that was my goal. Is I just wanted to be a good mom. And like, that's probably was like, that's probably not that's like a low hanging fruit goal. Well, I had never seen that in reality. And so for me,
in a way,
yeah. So like in fact, I used to say like, okay, what was my experience? Okay, let's just do the exact opposite. And that's got to be better, because I know that really hurt me. So like one of the things I always tell my children is, I love you no matter what. There is nothing you could ever do, ever, that would cause me not to love you. And that's actually something that I learned from when my brother got murdered. So that's a whole other separate story that we can go into. But that happened watching the person who killed him, their family backing them up and being there, even despite the reality that this person admitted, and it's on camera, that they killed my brother. And not just like a little, like violently, Dateline special kind of murdered him. And they still showed up. And there was a lot of, that's the most traumatic thing I've ever been through, is watching all this happen and living through it. But there was a lot of stories and insights that I learned about who I was and who I wanted to be as a parent and as a human being in that experience. And so what I realized is I did not have unconditional love. I did not have unconditional. My love came with conditions for everything. If I was a good girl, if I behaved, if I listened, if I did as I was told, then I was loved. The moment I wasn't, it was contingent upon that. And I realized I want my kids to be exactly who they are, which I think that most of us are damaged in some way, by life, not necessarily a single person, but just by the experience of going through this life, that no matter how they showed up with whatever damage that they had happened to them during the day, that they would be loved by their mother, no matter what. Yeah. Because that is something I didn't have.
My listeners are going to be so mad at me if we don't dive into what happened to your brother, right? And we are listeners, so hang out for a minute, because I want to address one thing that is such a common thread: breaking the rules. Okay, you break the rules in helping people find jobs, right?
Yeah.
You broke the rules as far as like, I'm going to be a bad girl, and I'm doing quotes for non-YouTube people, versus a good girl, and whatever that means at the time. And you also have broken the rules as far as your faith. And you told me this in the DMs, that you started to associate God and religion with like what is happening on Sunday and then what is happening on Wednesday. And you broke that relationship for a period of time in your life. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you in your brain and in your experience to abandon religion?
Oh my gosh. Like the truth is, I got married so young to my husband, my first husband, because I didn't want to live in sin. Like, I don't tell people that. Like, that's why I got married, is that I didn't want to live in sin anymore. And so, like,
Oh,
you didn't
as
have a
defined by your faith.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. As defined by the way I was raised. I don't know that everybody gets that, but you were not supposed to be living together. So that's what I did not want to be that. And like, really, let's just be honest. Your frontal lobe is not completely developed until you're 25. You should,
Right.
I'm like, you do not get married until you're after 25. That's what I tell my kids. Cause I'm like, until then you're not making good decisions. Okay. And
Fair.
so
Fair.
yeah. So that's my piece on that piece. So I when I came to Seattle, I think I've told you, like, this was like a place of liberation for me. I was on a Greyhound bus, and there's a bridge. It's the longest floating bridge in the world. And right before you go over it, it's like a portal. It goes through a hill. So it's a little tunnel that says the gateway to the Pacific. And every time I go by that, I think about that moment where I realized my freedom. It was my freedom that came back. And so I had to like reinterpret who I was as a human without friends or family that were, I had a whole new fresh start. And that's why, I just love Seattle so much. People don't understand like how much I love it, but people here are just really non-judgmental. They really kind of live and let live. And so that to me was just wildly refreshing for it. Me walking away, I had to learn, for me, I wanted to be a good person every day. Like, I didn't want to be good on just Sunday. And I didn't want to go like, I was living with these principles, and let me just tell you, like, I am a fan of Jesus. I am a fan of his. Like, I believe that he is all encompassing, all love, nothing judgmental. Like, he loves you just like I talk about how I love my kids. I love them no matter what they're doing. Now, he's doing a way better job than me, I'm sure. But like, what I'm saying is that without the humanity side, but what I mean is that that's what he is to me. But at the time, my God was a very vengeful God that you were what?
He was an Old Testament God.
Old Testament God, yes. And he was going to come after you, and like you are, if you're not, like, I still, this is how conditioned I am. When I see an ambulance, I say a prayer and I ask in Jesus' name, right? Like that, I say it. I say it in my head because I'm praying for that person to be safe. Yeah. Like I pray for the roadkill. I'm praying all the time.
Yes.
I probably pray way more than I realize. But like that, so the part of coming to, I still haven't figured this out. It's a very complex relationship. I really don't like religion. That's the part, is I don't like organized religion or systems of control over other people. That's probably my biggest piece. Cause I'm like, I feel like you have a lot of autonomy as a human being. You have a lot of ability.
Name drop.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, you have the ability to have advocacy and agency of yourself and your life. And so a lot of these things are systems of control. And so I don't believe, like, if I truly believed that Old Testament God, it meant that my dad didn't go to heaven. That was like one of the main shifts, because my dad did not go to church. And at the very end, he was like a shell of who he was, because that brain surgery altered, like, he just wasn't there anymore. Like, I lost him that night, basically. And then, it was really hard to get to watch that. And so my thought is that I don't believe in a God that wouldn't send my dad to heaven. I don't believe in that. So that was I'm so sorry, I've never said that out loud.
That this was the root. It wasn't that church is weird. It wasn't that it's boring. It's that, how is it possible that there is this God up here who supposedly cares about me, that is not going to save my dad, that is not going to let my dad come to heaven?
Yes, because he was a good guy and he's a hero to me. And so
he was a good guy. He was a hero. How can he not go to heaven?
Exactly.
Because he didn't show up at church on Sunday. Okay, keep going.
And so one of the things that kind of reframed this later on for me was that I love my children. I love my children so much. I would die in an instant for them. I have no qualms about who matters most to me in my world. It is my kids. And so they said, okay, so you've done something really bad. So I'm going to go put your hand on the stove, and you will never, ever get to take your hand off the stove. I will burn you for the rest of your life. And I thought I could never comprehend that as a human. And I was like, that's not my God. That's not the God I believe in. And I don't believe that my God would, as my father would send me or any of his children to that. And that no matter what you believe about people and judge them for that, I don't believe that that is what your maker would want for you. I don't believe that. So that's what I don't believe that anybody goes to hell. That's actually what I've come up with.
Yeah.
And so that's my belief. And you can take it or you can leave it. But I think that hell is actually a reality we create for ourselves. And so for me, that's how I look at it. And so what I do is like, do I feel good with myself afterwards? That's my own compass. My moral compass is here. And I don't need to be in church to find that. In fact, I found it. One of my friends she's a really big churchgoer. And she said, you actually embody more Christian values than most of the people I go to church with. And I was like, that's really what matters is, am I a good person at the end of the day? That's what I'm judging at. And so not whether or not, because what I've seen is that people can go to church and lead the songs for church and then go cheat on their wife afterwards, And so to me, that's the part where I'm like, there was discrepancy where I'm like, do as I say, but not as I do. And so this is how I've kind of commingled it together. And so when I talk about like the universe and my maker, like, I don't care. You can put whoever you want in that role. But like, I do believe that there is a higher calling, a higher power. And it's not the God that I learned about in Sunday school. It's a very different experience. And that like, I think Jesus loves me and that I am saved just because of that. That's it. Yes. And so that's how I experience it. It doesn't mean that I do not go to church and that my experience with him is very personal.
Yes. And I love that you fought for that. It's not that you've like just kind of thrown it all to the wind and just said, it's just going to be easier not to face my faith or my religion or this higher power that people talk about or whatever it may be, but you fought for it. And I think you've earned in a way that view, right? You've earned that view in your life. So when you went to Seattle and you're crossing over the bridge and you're having this experience of sort of a new life, you have since divorced. Is that correct?
I've been divorced a long time. Very early in my 20s, I divorced.
So do you feel like, okay, you got divorced, you came to Seattle and you're experiencing this new thing. Do you think you ever faced atheism?
Did you go down that road? I think that I'm going to say this is probably going to tick a whole bunch of people off. I have a real hard time with people with white Jesus. Ooh. What I mean by that is we have whitewashed Jesus when he was from the Middle East. And we have this belief that if they don't look like us or sound like us or that then they're not real Christians. And so for me, that was how this is like a joke for what I say with my family. So I'm like, when I hear people talking about Jesus and judgment of that, that's what I'm like, oh, you believe in white Jesus. And so I say that like very tongue in cheek, because I'm like, oh, this is it. I was like, well, probably Jesus didn't look like your neighbor. Jesus probably looks like a lot of the people that, that are in Afghanistan. That's probably what Jesus looked like. And so just going to say, right? Like it's
like looking just culturally.
Yes. Just saying like, so when I see people who are like this, all these other things and pushing religion onto that, I was like, that is, Jesus never did that. Like Jesus showed by example, right? Like Jesus hung out with sinners. Jesus, cleaned the feet of other people. Like he was in every way what I aspire to be like, and in no way will ever come close. Right. Like that is the Jesus that I believe in. And that's like, I mean, it is New Testament Jesus, but for some reason, like we found a way to like condone and sentence people to hell and judge them, which I have such a hard time because I was like, that is the definition of a hypocrite in the Bible. Like that is the definition of a hypocrite in the Bible. And so it just shocks me that people have come to that conclusion. And it's very, very prominent where I grew up. And so a lot of this came into play where like, hey, it's eye for an eye. The person who killed your brother should also suffer the same consequences.
Wow. So you teach your children about Jesus.
I say, I talk about Jesus a lot, but I don't really, it's very hard for me to navigate that because I don't want to impose on them a same church system. And so I want them to believe in what, this is going to sound just so bad, but like, I want them to find their own peace with a higher calling. So like, I ask them what they believe. Oh. And so that's the part where it's like the systems, like if I asked my kids the other day, I said, do you believe that if there's tribes out there that have never been exposed to any kind of civilized world, at all, right? In fact, there's some right now that you can go on and they would kill you because you're an outsider. Do you believe that
Right.
those people will not go to heaven because they never have experienced Jesus? They've never been taught that.
Mhm.
And I'm like, in what world would I do that? Like, in what world would I sentence children of mine because of ignorance? And that's not their fault. So that's why I'm like, I don't believe in that. Like, I believe that
Yeah.
there were lots of people like Jesus, like ascended masters is what people call them. I think there were lots of people like that came to earth. And so that
Mhm.
they have their own experience, but they all embodied the same thing to me. And so, like, we're all technically sons of God, right? Sons and daughters of God. And so if we think like that, then we are no different. So like when I'm looking at humans,
Mhm.
sometimes I really dislike people, right? Like I'm just like not a fan. But I also am like, that is my sibling, right? Like you are part of me and I'm a part of you. And so I have to
Yes.
try to have some of that grace with how I experience reality. But I also realize like they also have to have, you have to have the polarity. Like if everything was always warm all the time, you would never know what it's like to be cold. Right. So I can't have the experience. The same thing, like you can't be happy all the time. You have to have highs and lows because it's the polarity. And that's how I kind of feel like God is that God in of itself, we're flames of that part of God. And that's what we chose to come and experience on this planet. And that we are here in the experience to live both the light and the dark and to learn lessons as souls. That's how I believe. That's what I believe. And this has come from, I've done a lot of ayahuasca. I have spent time sitting with like my reality because I was like, what do I believe? And this is what was like shown to me is honestly how the best way to describe it. And I did that after my brother because I was like, I need something. I need to figure out, is my brother okay? I need something. And so that was my way of accessing these bits of information of how I navigate the world. And I have never talked about this really. And so, but I needed something, some way, because there was, when you lose somebody in such a catastrophic way, that you have like all these answers that you want to know. And I felt like, I have talked about this before, but I felt like my brother was talking to me. I felt like he was talking to me all the time. In fact, I was like given this visual of what happened. And when I looked at his autopsy, it was exactly as what it was shown to me. And I could have never known that. And it was just wild what I had. And it was only because in that darkest traumatic moment that something pulled me out of it. And I believe it was my brother. And I believe that he is fine and he is safe and I will get to see him again. And so for me, like, I don't really have a relationship, that's normal, but I still talk to my brother all the time. I talk to him more now than I talked to him before then. It's such a weird thing, but it is my reality. And, whether you believe me or not, allows me to cope, with that.
Oh,
It allows
sure.
me to see. And I think I was telling you that like I've experienced miracles in this relationship of when I ask for guidance and insights that I am in that moment, and it has been wild to me. And it's where I stopped believing necessarily in like what I can see and touch, because I think that we really live by what is matter, what is physical. And there's something way deeper than that. Like I don't believe that we're just these, meat suits. I think we're souls and we have a
Yes.
reason and experience. And that we actually kind of signed up for this experience and we knew what the potentials of what could be possible for us in this life, and that we would go through it in order to determine who we wanted to be and how we wanted to evolve as parts of ourselves. That's what I feel is true. And so
And
to
that's
me,
what draws us to a
what?
higher calling. That's what draws us to that higher calling is
Exactly.
a remembrance of what we signed up for. Oh, I
Yes.
love.
And we go through different things, really hard things. And we chose
Mhm.
that, and which is why no one is evil and no one is good. Everything is kind of neutral and you get to choose which way. So just like, I don't think the person who killed my brother is evil. Yes, it was an evil act, but I don't believe that person at their core is evil. I just don't, because I don't think that that's how we are. They made decisions that are way, and they expressed, they had to express that choice in a way, but that didn't make them good or evil. And nor is it my place to judge it as good or evil. That's another part that I've had to learn in this process, is that it's not my job to be the judge or the jury. And so
Wow.
the only thing that I can do here is that, how do I make sure that my brother's memory is one that I tell the story of versus the
Yes.
rest of the world? And so that to me, because I'm the only one willing to tell that story. And so that's what has been my part in this.
And your marketing background and ability to tell stories will be such an asset in helping him be remembered in that way. And so I love that you feel like he talks to you. Like there's a book of scripture that just guides me, that I hold so dear to my heart. And it teaches that, like, angels, however you may think about it, it is not necessarily God, it's people you know that care for you and are fighting for you. And my heart just explodes when you talk about, like, it's him talking to me.
Yeah.
Like, of course it would be him, right? Like, of course it would be. I think that's beautiful. So are you willing to set the stage a little bit about your brother?
Yeah, I think I can talk about it. I'm going to tell you, like, at some points I may feel like I'm dissociated and I'm not in it. And it's because it's too hard to be in the feeling. So I'm going to try my best to tell you that story without, like, breaking down, because it is the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Yeah. So when I was in my entrepreneurial journey, and it was my daughter's 5th birthday, and they say, like, turn off your phone and be present for life. Well, I did. I turned off my phone and I was present for life.
This is not how
this is not the message to get you, by the way. It would not have changed anything had my phone been on. So just know you should still turn off your phone and be present, because nobody gets to turn 5 again. It was only one day she got to turn 5.
I don't want this story to start this way, though. I am dying. Really? Her 5th birthday and your phone is off? Okay.
The phone is on silent and away. And so we had opened our presents. We spent the whole day together, and she was, 5's a big deal. It's a big number. And I remember a little later, I was in my bedroom and I picked up my phone and I looked down and it said 911, call me, and about like 28 missed calls. And I remember thinking, I've been here before where they're like, please call me. And when they say that, that's like cue, someone has died, because I have a really large extended family. So I'm like, okay. What's happened? And I was sure it was my mom. I was sure it was my mom. Like I was gearing myself up to hear that.
Why were you sure it was your mom?
Because it was my aunt. This is my mom's closest sibling and her sister. Okay. So I just thought for sure, if anybody was going to do it, it would have been her. Okay. So I thought that. So then I answer the phone, or pick up the phone and I call, and it's my uncle, who doesn't even live there. And I was like, okay. And he goes, your brother's been stabbed. And I don't even know what else he's droning on about at this point, because all I want him to get to the point is to tell me, where is he and where can I talk to him? That's all I want to know. That's all I want to know. I say, okay. So he finally stops talking and I say, okay, where is he? And he goes, baby girl, he's gone. Oh. And that was it. It was the time my world was shattered. And I don't know what happened after that, because this is really, really deep in the moment, right? I start like crying like a wounded animal. My husband is like freaking out. He doesn't know what's going on. My children come running in, and I can see my husband just wants to know what's going on. What just wants to going on? And I go, it's my brother's name. He's been murdered. He was stabbed to death. And I did it right in front of my kids. And I will never forgive myself for it, because I watched them crumple. They just fell to the ground. It was like I'd physically hurt them, and they just started crying. And I didn't mean to do it, but I was just trying to tell my husband what was going on, so he understood.
How old are they?
5 and 6 at the time.
5 and 6.
Yeah, okay. So they're little. They're little bitty. But their dad, or their uncle, was their favorite uncle, and like my daughter, she was his most favorite girl in the world. Like, there we go. There's the scene. Starts. And so I have no answers, because it's a very small town in the Midwest, and the police department can close on the weekends, I guess. But what I did have was a reporter had reached out to me earlier in the day. But you know how everything is kind of sus on Facebook. They're like, do you know somebody at this address? And I was like, I'm not going to respond to you, because, like, what are you, like a Nigerian prince and going to give me like $10 million?
My money.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm not telling you anything. But afterwards, after I got off the phone, I was like, that person knows something. And that's a real reporter, I bet. And so I wrote her and I said, I think she gave me her phone number, and I called her and I said, I'm Lindsay. I'm this person's sister. I have no information. What can you tell me? And she told me, like, basically, the police were at my brother's house and that he had been taken away many hours before this, many hours. And like there was no information. And then this is why I hate the news now. She asked me for a quote and butchered the quote so bad that it sounded like I was being really mean about my brother, and I never ever so I don't trust media ever. Like if it bleeds, it leads. They absolutely took me in my highest moment of pain and used it to their advantage. But she gave me what I needed to know, and because I needed insight of how the heck I was going to deal with this situation. And so my brother was stabbed 104 times.
Oh, Lindsay.
He was asleep when it happened. He also was ex-military. Like, he hadn't been asleep, he probably would have had a chance. It's just like the person it's not your children that are the closest related to you on this planet. Like, they're 50% you, but the person who is most closely related to you is your sibling. So the blood that was spilled, that wasn't his blood, it was my blood. Right? Like, that's what it felt like. Like, there's no one, and my mom used to always tell me this, and I just was like, oh, man, I had a little brother. He was annoying me all the time, right? Like, he's like, there's nobody in the world that's closer to you than your brother. And I just kept reliving that. This is my blood that was spilled. And I was devastated. I mean, I don't even know, like, the kind of grief that I'm still processing. I still miss him so much.
And in this moment of like, I can't even go there because he's not there, because it's been hours. I find out
he's not there, and he's
crime, not an accident.
Not an accident. And I knew the person had been detained from the reporter. And so, like, basically at this point, like, what do you do? Right? So I'm like, well, like, I can't do anything. So, like, literally, I have this news. They've got his body. There's a police investigation. We can't even go to the house. Like, there's nothing we can do. So the only thing is on there is, like, for my mom to figure out what she wants to do. Right? Because that's next of kin is my mom. Right? And so, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, like, what would my brother want? Because my brother's super not religious, because we both had the same trauma, and what would he want? I was like, oh, he would not want a regular funeral where they're reading a whole bunch of, like, scripture and hymns and, like, that would so not be him. And so I remember, but this is not my battle, right? This is not my battle. Like, this is the time where, for once, I'm going to stay out of it, because I'm all up in, I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. Got me in trouble a lot. The next day, my mom called me while she was at the funeral home locally. And so she said, what would he want? And I was like, oh, I'm really glad you asked. Because I think after going through all this, I found out that I'm the closest person in the world to my brother.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. That was the case. And that's part of my regret. I feel like so terrible about it, is that I didn't know that I was the closest person in the world to him. I said, well, Mom, he would never want like a church thing. And she's like, but I don't know what to do with his body. And I go, I don't think that my brother would want to be buried. I don't think he would want to have his body preserved. I don't. And she's like, but should I go see him? And I go, Mom, he would never want you to see him as his body looks right now. He's so strong. He wanted to always present the strong image. He always wanted to protect you. Always took. I mean, he was the kind of guy. My mom needed a new car, and it's like a 12-hour drive. He drove down that weekend, went and bought my mom a car, delivered it, installed a shower curtain, and then went back home. Like, he was the person who did that. Yes, and so I'm like, he would never want. And so she's like, okay, I'll have him cremated. And I was like, okay, I feel like okay. And then eventually, the reality of everything in the crime scene was brutal. Like, brutal. Like, I think about this because I have a son. I have a son, and I think about this as my mother. And even though my mother and I are, we don't have a relationship now, that I love my mom. I still love my mom. I wish she would ask for forgiveness and do anything to repair our relationship, but she refuses. And so that I can only change my side of the equation, and I can have healthy boundaries, and that's the boundary I've set. And so her reality is of her own making, but I love my mom. And so I said I would take this on. I would take on talking to the police. I would take on taking care of the house. I would take it all on so that she wouldn't have to go through it.
So pause. Did you, part of your entrepreneurship side of you, like, I don't know how to say this, so just fire me. Did you want to take it on because you knew you could do it right or do it well? Or were you kind of like, I am doing this because my mom can't do it? Like,
I'm doing it because my mom can't do it.
I'm
Yeah.
doing it
My
because
mom
my mom.
can't do it, and I don't know that she would do it well because she was a basket case. And who wouldn't be? That's not a judgment. The fact that I could get through it, because I am an emotional, like, roller coaster. I am so highly emotional. I am way more emotional than my mom, but this was not my child. This was my brother. Even though he was like, when I did raise my brother as a child. And so I have a lot of regrets around that now that I don't have as much time with him as I thought I would. The thing that kind of set me off to immediately, because I like the house, all these things. I'm sorry, this is a lot of information, but did you know that when somebody is cremated, that they mail the returns to you? The cremains. They mail you, and you can only go through the post office. But I was like, absolutely not. No one is mailing my brother, no matter what. And my sister, who's not really my sister, remember this is the one that's not a sister. She works for Alaska Airlines. A shout out to Alaska Airlines. This is not sponsored by them, but I'm going to tell you my experience for them. They got me on a flight the very next morning, and I was on standby. But instead, they upgraded me, put me in premium seats, brought me anything I wanted to eat. The captain came out and said, "We're so sorry. You're a member of our family now. We're going to take care of you. Make sure you get to your destination safely so that you can take care of your brother." Is the most, I know, like I will never not be an Alaska person because of that. So they were just amazing to me. So I got out there. They asked me if I wanted to see him before he got cremated. And I said, absolutely not. I do not want to see this person who is not my brother. This is just his remains, right? Like my brother is elsewhere. This is just his body. This is just his vessel, right? And so what I want is to take his body home. I just want to take his body home. And so I said, no, I do not want to see him. I'm comfortable with the last moment that I saw my brother, which was happy, healthy, and smiling and hugging me, right? That is who I want to remember. And so I went and he had two cars, and my husband came up and he drove one car down, and I drove his Mustang, and I put him in the passenger seat with his uniform, because he was Air Force that he discharged from honorably. And I drove him home to his mama. And then I went back and I got the house straightened up and all these other things. But the hardest moment of it was when I walked into his house. No, I had never been there before. He bought this house because he wanted to have a family. So this big house. I walked in and I had asked the people, it was a biohazard because of all the blood. And I mean, you think of 104 stab wounds and how many gallons of blood, which I think there's about 2 in your body. Walked into his room where he died, and there's a hole in the floor that's human shaped, because that's where they cut out the subfloor because he bled so much. And that was the hardest moment for me, and so very, very traumatizing. But like, you'd be scared to walk into that house, and I was. But when I walked in, I didn't feel like it was evil. I don't know how to describe that. Like, I didn't feel like it was something in the house was going to get me. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say? Like, yeah. I thought that like I would be spooked and freaked out, and I wasn't. The house felt totally neutral. They'd already emptied all the stuff out that had exposure, which destroyed everything in his house for the most part. Like, he was a bachelor, so everything in his house was just destroyed. So nothing was there. It just felt like an empty house. But where I did find love was in his garage, where I felt like whenever I would see his car was propped up because he was working on it, and all of his tools. Yeah. He loved cars, just like my dad. That was where I found him. But I knew that I wanted this house. One of my hopes one of his hopes was to have a family, and I knew that I wanted this house to sell, and I wanted it to be a place where a family would grow. Oh my gosh! So we fixed it all up. I repaired everything I thought that would need to be repaired, so that it would be ready for people that could have a family someday if they were willing to. Because I 100% disclaimed what had happened in there. I did not want to. You do not want to be lying, but it got snapped up within 2 weeks of us putting it on the market in winter in Wisconsin, like in the middle of nothing. Like it was great, and so I rested assured that was taken care of. But the hardest part, was. I was telling you a little bit about this before, was trying to write his eulogy. Like, I was the one who planned the service. My mom kind of just opted out, which is actually a reoccurring theme for her, is just opting out of like making the hard call. And I have a lot of forgiveness for her for this, because this is such a traumatizing moment. I don't even think that she doesn't remember anything I said. She doesn't remember anything about this time. So I'm sure she was just in like, acute stress at that time.
Yes.
But trying to write a eulogy for the person who's most closely related to, and like try to define it, a life in a series of like 5 paragraphs. And it's just like, you realize like how little work means. That was one of the things I took away from this, is like how little your job matters. Your job gets a paragraph. Your job gets a paragraph. That's what you did. So all those hours, which is probably the majority of your best hours of your life, will be reduced to a single paragraph. But what will matter is who's in the room to hear that paragraph. And those are the people that you really need to be focused on. And so that was a really humbling experience. And we had, I can't remember what they're called now because it's blanking me, but there are veterans that will come. They do it for people who are like the veterans. They become like the motorcycle gang, and they hold flags for all of my family as I came in the church. And I went outside and I thanked every single one of them for being there. And then the honor guard was there, and we had a military burial. But he actually is buried at my grandma's church, which I know I said he doesn't like church, but here's the deal. I said, I feel like Brent would want to be buried under a tree. And so the only place, if you think about it, you don't want to bury somebody in your backyard,
right?
Because you never be able to get rid of that land, right? Like you would never. And so how could you do that? And how can in 100 years it still be okay? And that was where the church would likely still be there. And so my brother is buried over in this beautiful, almost like a pasture. There's cows next door.
Yeah.
And this beautiful sunset maple, the leaves are this like beautiful orange, and he's there. And that's where he's buried.
Well, and let me just, as we talk about this experience, some of the things you've had to do are quite normal for when someone passes away. You're doing where are we going to bury them? What do they want? Being grateful for the people that support, noticing who's in the room, all these things. There is this whole other complexity that this was not some accident. This was not cancer. And I'm being respectful of cancer and brain tumors, all those things. And that's not what I mean to bring up. But there's a real complexity here where he was killed, like murdered, right?
And intentionally.
Intentional. Yeah. So when did you start to find out like what had happened and that kind of experience? What was that like for you?
That was certainly the hardest part. When somebody is murdered, there's obviously a crime scene. There's a detective or a series of detectives. There's a coroner. There's a lot of things that have to happen. And so it made it really hard to get his death certificate, actually, to make a lot of these things happen in order to even bury him. So I had to go through and navigate all of these complexities with the police. And so what I did is when I was out there, I sat down with the detectives and the district attorney and really just like heard about all of these things. And so what ended up happening is that it doesn't, like, the justice system is very slow. So my brother died in 2019, but we didn't go into court until mid 2020. What happened in 2020?
Oh, COVID.
Pandemic. Lovely. Yeah. So they actually canceled his murder trial. They canceled it. And I don't know that I've ever screamed so much as I did at that moment, because it wasn't like it was rescheduled, tabled for later. It was canceled. And I was like, this is the only way that I can get any kind of justice for my brother.
Right.
So the person who killed him was young. She was 18 years old. She was like
female
and tiny. They charged her with intentional homicide. So that's murder. And in order to do this, I went and talked to the detective, and I had a real sense that this person was really unwell. And so one of the things, you see a lot on like detective shows is that they're found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Right.
This person was very mentally unstable, really had gone through a lot of their own stuff in their own life, and like had like a psychotic break. That's kind of what had happened. It doesn't excuse it. I just need you to know like that this person was actually unwell. And so when I sat down after we finally got the date on the calendar, I sat down with the district attorney, and he's like, we have One of the things they didn't tell me during the police investigation is that my brother had installed Google Nest, I think is what it is, or
Yeah.
he had videos and audio. Everything is on camera.
Oh no.
I shouldn't say that. Everything is on audio. The bedroom didn't have it, but you could hear it. So because the living room had audio, so even though they were upstairs, you could hear it. And that to me was by far the scariest thing they had told me. One, I did not want to see it. I did not want to see it. And the second part was that I did not want my mother to see it.
And the requirement was you would have to see it in court for it to be like
you would, yeah.
Okay.
So, yes. And so what I asked for was for a plea bargain. I asked for this. I asked for them to plead it down because I didn't want to subject the only people living in my family are me and my mom that are really going to be truly impacted by this. And the truth is, I didn't think she was well. I didn't think she was well based on anything, what the detective told me, how she behaved. I had more inside information. The weird part is I had a lot of guidance from my brother. I know this sounds so weird, but he gave me direction of what to do and what to say and how to show up and what he would want. I had all these intuitive hits of the things that would feel right for him and what he wanted. And so this to me is I'm not there. I'm not there. This doesn't matter. You protect mom is what I really got, was protect mom.
Protect mom.
And so I thought, okay, how do I protect my mother? And the thing is that if she heard what they were trying to come up with, stories about what happened there, that it would destroy her. It would destroy her if we went to a murder trial. And so I asked for a plea bargain. I asked for that. And what she ended up pleading guilty, but she was found not guilty by reason of insanity, which happens in 0.25% of all murder cases. It is not like it shows it on TV. It happens so rarely. It is very hard to prove, but they found her that way. And so
they, meaning a jury, or did she do a bench trial?
The judge is who makes it, and they make the recommendation after having what's called a forensic psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm not sure which one, but they go and they determine it. So I have no say. So what we did end up coming to therefore was the sentencing. And so this for me had been a year and a half at this point. We had been going through this, and I had learned every little breaking thing, but I had not told my mom about most of the things because honestly, she couldn't handle it. And two, she's not in it. And so it didn't matter. What I knew at this time is that the most important thing I could do was to write the story of what happened of my brother, because what I needed was the most maximum sentence that they possibly could. This was what I came out of it, because I had seen people who had this and they had walked away with nothing, because she was young. She had no prior history. She had nothing.
Yes.
And so thank God I'm a good storyteller.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm a good storyteller right now. I feel like I'm all over the place, but I'm a good storyteller. And so I was able to tell a story of what happened and what happened to my mom and what happened to me and what happened to my children and all of these things. And that one of the things that I did was I said, I forgive you. I forgive you for this. And it is not really for her. It was for me.
For you.
Yeah. Because forgiveness, hating somebody is like trying to drink poison and expecting the other person would die.
Yep.
And for me, letting this go and letting this let go and let God almost, I could only do what was within my circle of control, right? And so my goal was to tell this story. And so I told the story. I told the story of who my brother was and how he served in the military and who he was as a son and who he was as an uncle and a brother, and that he was the victim in this crime, and that there absolutely should be no case that this person is a risk, not just to the community and the property, but to themselves now, and that they should take into that. Right. They sentenced her to 15 years in a psychiatric hospital, which is a long time when you're 18 years old or 19 and a half at this point.
And you expected what? Was that I'm at peace with that? Or is that I
felt like I won.
I can't believe it.
Oh, I felt like I won. I felt like I won because she is mentally insane. What's considered, this is insane is not a psychiatric definition. It's actually a definition by the court system. It says that would this person have committed this crime, even if a police officer was standing next to them? And that's kind of the basis of whether or not they're considered actually insane.
The answer was yes.
Yes, to the point that she had to have one-on-one supervision because she was already in psychiatric hospital this whole time waiting for it. And so she had already had that because she was at risk of killing herself. And so she was already like very far gone. But the one thing is that so afterwards I came out feeling like I won. My family was so angry. And I'm like, remember, these are good Christian people.
Yes.
But they hadn't gone through the last, 18 months of what it took to get to this moment. They didn't understand
context.
None. And so what they saw is eye for an eye, right? This is what, this was the devil, this was evil. But when I looked in her eyes, I did not see the devil. I did not see evil. What I saw was a little girl just like me when I was 18 and all alone and scared and hurting from somebody abusing me. That is what I saw. And I had such empathy for that child. And what I looked behind her was I saw that parents that showed up no matter what, that their child was literally guilty of murder, admitted, and still showed up to love them. It was actually one of the biggest lessons I ever saw in love.
Her parents.
Her parents.
Did she look at you?
Yes, she said, I have what's called a victim's advocate. And she said, I have never in all of my years I've seen somebody who listened so intently to the victim's statement as she did to you. She watched me the whole time, never broke eye contact. Wow. So it was very emotional enough. I feel like a really sense of pride that the defense asked for a recess after my statement to lower the emotions in the room, because it was it made the judge cry of what my story was. And I feel very proud of that moment. And so that was, they came back and we had the sentencing. My mom couldn't even stay. So like when I said she couldn't handle it, she couldn't even stay past. I don't think she even stayed for my part, to be honest. And so she just left, which was fine because it was mine to carry. Mm-hmm. But after that time, that was actually when it broke me, was after, because I had been fighting for this moment and I got my moment. And you know what you realize is that there is no justice. That's not a thing. We say like you want justice, and I got the best recourse I think that I could have in this. And what I still felt was all of the anger. So what I said, I forgave her. I have forgiven her every day I have been alive since this happened. I have had to forgive her every day because nothing will ever change. My brother is still never coming back. I will never hug him. I will never hold his children. I will never be the cool aunt. There will forever be a seat missing at Thanksgiving, because that's the time I would always see him. He will never come back. That was when the real healing has been. So for me, this is coming up on 5 years now of me trying to heal from that. And what's crazy about the court system is that when you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you, at least in this jurisdiction, you can apply for release every 6 months. Every 6 months.
And you have to show up every 6 months?
Every 6 months. And the person that, all the families there for the first one. After that, it was just me fighting this battle. And so, that was the hardest moment of my life. I shouldn't say that, the moment my brother died, but like reliving it and being re-traumatized.
Every 6 months.
And I didn't know that when I asked for a plea bargain. Now, I still would have taken looking back, I still would have asked for that, but I didn't know. I would have felt better if I had known that I could be dragged back into court. I don't have to attend, but again, I told you, like, my goal was to have my brother's memory. I went to court 12 times over the last time, and I haven't gone to court now for a year, but 12 times. And so I know, and I know when it's going to happen, because I get this sense of anxiety and I'm like, why am I so stressed out? And then I get the notice from the victims coordinator that here's the court date. Luckily you can log in on Zoom, but this is the court date. And every time I have to tell them, this story. Every time I have to go and evoke this emotion, every time I had to subject myself of living that moment. And it is like, we probably do a lot of workshops as webinars, and that's stressful. Now imagine trying to plead for your brother's life.
Yeah, it's just a whole different ballgame. Yeah.
It was so hard. And I came to a breaking point, and it's been almost a year now, where I said, Brent, I need a sign. I need a sign. Like, universe, I need a sign. Please tell me. Have I suffered enough? Have I suffered enough? Is it okay that I've honored your memory and that I can stop doing this? Because it felt like I was giving up on him. But his life didn't matter anymore. And I had cried and cried because we had just won. We had just won again. Conditional release denied. We had won again. And I've had to win every time. Every 6 months, I've had to win. And I just asked for this sign. And I swear to God that this image popped in my head, and it was a coin. Not just a coin, stacks of them. Stacks of coins. Gold coins, actually, in particular. And I was like, well, there's no way in hell that I'm going to get a sign that's like gold coins. Like, that's not going to happen. I work at home. The only place I'm going the rest of the day is to pick up my kids.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, this is what I'm asking for it today. Like, you don't usually get to ask the universe on the timeline, but I'm like, I need it today. I need to know.
Yes. Now's my moment.
Yes, that was my moment. And I went on and I was like, this is not going to happen. But guess what song comes on? I have thousands of songs on my playlist. There's only one song that talks about piles of gold. And it was the song that played.
No.
And I was like, okay, I hear you. I hear you. You heard me, and I hear you.
And was it? No.
And then I was like, you know what? That's just not signy enough for me. I'm not kidding you. I'm picking up my kids. So I got my son in the back, and I'm like sitting down the street, and I am literally thinking, that's just coincidence. I do not believe there are coincidences now. That's just coincidence. And I'm sitting here, and I listen, and I'm looking down the street, and I'm thinking, I just hope I get a sign. And I hear a coin drop. My son's in the backseat, and I go, baby, I think you dropped something. And he goes, I didn't move. And I look back, and right behind my seat is a coin. Not even where my son could drop it. I have no idea how this happened, but a coin dropped out of the literal ether. And that was when I knew it was not coincidence. There is no way to earthly explain what happened. And this is why I'm like, I believe in something way bigger than what I think I was told in my life.
Beautiful.
This coin. And I just cried because it was like, it's okay. I don't want you to suffer anymore. That's what I felt like he was saying to me. I don't want you to suffer anymore. And let me tell you, I got the memo. Okay, I got the memo. But I was scared to write the message to my victims unit coordinator and say, listen, I don't want to hear about this anymore. Because I felt like I was like admitting defeat.
Yes.
But the truth is, like, my life is not going to be any different because this person who's many states away is released, right? My life is not going to be any different.
So pause. Does this mean if you don't advocate, she will be released? Like by you letting go?
No, that's not actually what happens. So what happens is I get to say my piece. And people make decisions emotionally, so we know that, right? Yeah. I get to help with that because the judge has the call. But what he's really looking at is the psychologist's evaluation, which has said she is not mentally stable enough to be on that. So I have to know, one of the things I learned on this process was I'm not the judge, I am not the jury. I have to let them make the call, and I get to show up. And the only thing I want to show up is I want to remind them that this is not just a case number, which I said to them the last time I was there. I'm not just a case. And I know you guys are really concerned about, your holiday plans, or they were talking about Easter baskets. And I sent a whole message, and they're like, I'm so sorry that you ever thought we did not lose the gravity of the situation. This is what the judge said to me after I gave this speech last time. Because I was like, this is just another day for you. But for me, this is the day it changed my entire life. Mm-hmm. And so, they take the recommendation of the psychologist. So really, no, it doesn't really matter, but it does. It mattered to me. That's who mattered.
So symbolic to you.
Exactly. It was like, I'm not giving up on my brother. I didn't give up on him. I'm the only person in this world who didn't give up on him. And I needed him to tell me it was okay. That it was okay that I'm not giving up on him. So I couldn't bring myself to send the email. So I was sitting with my daughter waiting to drop her off for school. Just a couple of days later, I hadn't sent the email. And it happened again. Another coin out of nowhere.
Coin.
And I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. And I sent the message off. And this is the last one. I had 3 coins that came. I met a friend who was flying through. And I was telling her about kind of what happened. And she goes, you know what? I found this penny and something told me to come and give it to you. This penny.
No.
He doesn't even live here. She's coming back from Hawaii going to Utah. And she's like, I don't know why, but here. And I told her the whole story. And so it was like not just one sign, it was 3 signs. And like, so it was enough for me to finally say, I am no longer going to continue to perpetuate this re-traumatization cycle. My brother knows I love him. I wrote a letter, the deepest letter of my heart, and I put it on file and I said, I want you to read this every time that you have to come to court, but I don't need to read it.
Yeah.
I want you to read it. And I don't want to be notified anymore because I don't want to suffer anymore. And I feel at peace now with it. It's still very hard to let go, but so do I believe in God? Yes. And do I believe in science? Yes. And I believe we are way bigger than what we seem. And I really thank my brother for allowing me to go ahead and step away from this. And that I feel like he knows how much he was loved. That's what it was. It was just a way for me to prove that he was loved and that he mattered and that somebody misses him. And I will never be whole again, but I know I'll get to see him again. So.
Well, and Lindsay, I mean, my heart is just racing and calm at the same time. I can't even describe the feeling. And something I want to bring back from like the first 3 minutes we were talking that is so iconic to me is you actually, your whole thing about growing up and I am not enough. I can do all the things and I am never enough. And then the last message, and so you leave God in a way, you leave your faith of origin, you leave the town, you do all these things. And what's so whole about this experience is the most recent message you have gotten is that this was enough. You were enough. Right? Wow. And that to me is miraculous.
I haven't even thought of it like that, but that it was I had done enough. I had enough. And I mean, a literal miracle had to occur multiple times in order for me to take it. That's the part where I'm like, sometimes, like you're just you're just so obstinate. You just won't take the message. But this one was
the message was that important for you.
And I immediately doubted it, right? Like I was like, no, this just like, it's just a coincidence. How can you tell me that? I mean, literally I should start asking for like dollar bills to come out of the air, but
yes,
still.
Yes, lottery.
I love it. Like anything where I'm like, I just almost believe that anything is possible now. Like that's where I'm like, because I have no logical, rational explanation. And I know that like the times where I've sat like contemplating what's out there, what I feel like is my knowing my truth, which is different than any book. That's the thing is like, I kind of have to like chart my own course here, is that there is so much more beyond. And that's where I'm like, I've assembled my own belief system that operates with a way of what I was taught and what I believe, like that everything comes down to just love, which is my highest value. Everything I do in life is about showing love, being a symbol of love for other people, acting with love. I mean, I don't pass all the time, but I really do deeply care about, I even care about this person that killed him. I care that she is rehabilitated and that she goes on to be something in the world. I do care. Like miraculous. The love is there. And so if we're all part of one whole, like I can't hate that person and love them. And so there's been a lot of lessons for me in this. So, which I think that most people would find unreasonable.
I mean, it brings it all back and it seems like really dumb to talk about a brand, but I think that it matters so much that we acknowledge the impossible, right? the things in your life, the experiences that have felt impossible, and then the impossible ways that either God is communicating with you, or your brother is, or your boy that comes in and says, "You are my hero. You are a mom, and you are working, and you are hustling, and you are present." I mean, just the absolute impossible things that we are allowed to experience in life. We have covered a ton today. Just
It is.
and I am so grateful. And there is nothing that I can wrap up more than hoping that people will see that all things are made right, right? And that comes through whatever pathway you want to believe in. And entrepreneurship is one thing that makes things right in people's lives. And that's great, but you've experienced that through intense trauma and through abandoning your faith of origin and those things. And I just think there is such beauty in power in people hearing that. Thank you for your ability to be open and honest with something so incredibly raw. Thank you
For having me and for listening. If anybody's there, so appreciate it.
Well, and for all of our listeners, every guest, Lindsay for sure, very much at the top, these are all people that I just firmly believe you need to have in your life to observe and to watch. I don't care if you're not looking for a job, like what she serves, like just be around her. And we'll link all of that in the show notes. So as we bring this interview to a close, we have a little tradition that we just do a couple of lighthearted, rapid fire questions at the end.
Okay.
Just to allow you to share some of your little sporadic wisdom here. So I've got 3 questions here for you. Are you ready?
Okay. I'm ready. I feel like I'm on Jeopardy now. Okay.
Oh, they're not hard. They're not.
Oh, okay. Good.
We'll see. What's your favorite sports team?
Favorite sports team? Probably Seattle Sounders is our soccer team here locally. We've been fans for a long time.
It's a local sport. I love that so much. I love that. What is one book everyone should read?
Oh gosh. One?
Oh no, it's the worst question for business people.
Okay. I think
the
one that changed my life and gave me a lot of sense of power is Power versus Force by David Hawkins.
Oh, fabulous.
He's hard to read a little bit sometimes, but incredibly powerful. And I'm just going to give a second one because I think everybody needs to hear it. It's what I teach my kids. It's the 4 Agreements.
Oh, I love that book. Yes, that is a must. I haven't thought about that one for a long time. Good job.
Yeah, it's very intentional. Like right now with my kids, where I'm like be impeccable with your word is like the one that we're working on right now. Be impeccable with your word. We don't like tell white lies. We just say what's actually really happening, and we don't be impeccable with your word.
I love it. Okay, final question. This one may be hard. Sorry.
Oh, the other ones were hard.
What is one thing you think everyone should just let go of?
Oh my gosh. Just let go of. I think that other people's expectations of you is probably one of the biggest ones, because I think that a lot of my life would have been significantly easier if I had just stopped trying to live up to everybody else. And if I just lived up to what I wanted to do, I would have spent a lot less years in crisis, I think, of who I was or what I should be, and just be okay that I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. But I am okay. I'm also for a lot of people, and that's perfectly great too.
Oh, and we are so glad that you have been willing to let that go. Those are the people you have helped. I love it. Well, thank you so much for an incredible message. I have no doubt our listeners are just weeping and cheering and all of the emotions in between because of what you've shared. And again, a huge thank you to the amazing Lindsay Mustain. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Unreasonable Autonomy podcast. If you loved this episode, my guests and I would love to hear about it. Go to the show notes to reach out and let me know what resonated with you or what topics or guests you want to hear in the future. I am here to create for you. Look, I deeply admire your commitment to pushing boundaries and going after an unreasonable life. Keep dreaming big, taking bold steps, and expecting the unreasonable. For more, go to the show notes to dive deeper into the conversations that will keep you going. Thanks for being here.